So we have moderating this panelist today. We have Mr. Gbleh-bo. Gbleh-bo is a 2016 honor graduate of the AMEU University with a Bachelor of Arts in Mass Communication. Gbleh-bo topped the Liberal Arts College, thereby winning a grand prize of 1,000 United States dollars in 2016. Gbleh-bo is currently the lead host of the popular OK Conversation on OK FM 99.5 and starts 3 p.m. from Monday to Thursday. In 2018, Gbleh-bo won the prestigious Chaffney Scholarship from the British government, earning an MSc in Education Policy and Society from the Cardiff University earlier this year. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Gbleh-bo, who will be moderating this discussion. This is not a debate, it's not a cross-cutting debate, and that's why Gbleh-bo is moderating. We are here to learn. One of the panelists today is Mr. Gbleh-bo. Gbleh-bo is an experienced financial professional with over a decade working as a central banker involved with regional integration issues in the West African Monetary Zone, formulation of financial sector policies, leading a successful career in the areas of risk management, corporate governance, international financial career in the reporting, performing corporate due diligence, leading critical financial sector projects, and handling time-sensitive and complex transactions. Additionally, he is a highly motivated economist, senior financial sector supervisor who has been involved with motivated economics, senior financial sector supervisor, quantitative analysis leading to evidence-based policy formulation and assessment. Mr. Brown is a recipient of several certifications, including certificates from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the West African Institute of Financial and Economic Management Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, the Euro Money Training. Mr. Brown is married to Mr. Genevieve Coleman Brown, and the union is blessed with 2 kids. He is also a member of the clergy of his local church, the Boston branch of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Lower Mount Gbleh. Mr. Brown currently serves as the head of financial sector development of the Central Bank of Liberia. He previously served as deputy officer in charge for operation and chief of staff in the office of the executive director of insurance, deputy director and assistant director for policy regulations, and principal banking examiner, all in the regulation and supervision division of the Central Bank of Liberia. He is a member of the Financial Stability Committee of the CBO and also served as chair of the Financial Inclusion Working Group under the implementation of the Financial Sector Development Implementation Plan of Liberia. He has represented the CBO and Liberia at large at various regional and international gatherings, including the statutory meetings of the West African Monetary Zone, high-level meetings of the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, and the IMF World Bank Spring and annual meetings. Mr. Brown is a 2013 graduate of the Center for Development Economics, the Williams College, Massachusetts, United States of America, where he earned a Master of Arts in Policy Economics. He is a 2008 graduate of the African Middle Episcopal University in Monrovia, Liberia, where he graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in accounting and economics minor and served as president of the AMEU Student Union 2007-2008. He completed his elementary, junior, and senior high school education at the Susan A. Berry Memorial High School, Owners Converter, where he served as valedictorian of the school and president of the Student Union in 2003. Mr. Brown has lectured on corporate governance and corrective action at the West African Institute for Financial and Economic Management in Lagos, Nigeria. In November 2019, the Perspective Online News Magazine and the Southern newspaper published an article authored by Mr. Gbleh-bo titled "Cultivating Digital Consciousness, Accepting and Affordability, a National Imperative." In that article, Mr. Brown exposed expert view on how digitizing the financial sector will spur economic benefits and legislate things against the persistent shortage of local governance. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for President Emeritus Mr. Gbleh-bo. junction, we want to introduce Mr. Alieu Fuad. Mr. Nyei is an economist and public financial practitioner with over 10 years of experience in public budgeting, public financial management, and public sector reform. He has consulted with the Collaborative Africa Budget Reform Initiative, Gbleh-bo, while he pushed reform teams in the Ministry of Finance of Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and the Gambia. From 2014 to 2018, Alieu was Assistant Minister for Expenditure at the Liberia Ministry of Finance and Development Planning, through which he led reform to travel policies that reduced travel expenditures by 30% and introduced fiscal rules that contain the growth in recurrent expenditure. He also led the establishment of a liquidity management committee that put data at the center of budget execution decisions to enhance budget credibility. Alieu is an economist and public sector reform with MSc in International Finance and Economic Development from the University of Reading, UK, and has attended executive education courses at the Harvard Kennedy School, London School of Economics, University of Florida, AMEU Institute, among others. In June 2019, he was guest faculty for the Kennedy School Executive Education course on implementing public policy. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for President Emeriti, Mr. Alieu Fuad. Thank you. We will turn over to Mr. Julius. Julius, the floor.
It was so good. I was not. Yeah. It was so good that I was not the one to introduce them, because it would be like a Jesus Christ and John the Baptist moment where he said, "I am unable to unlace your shoes." To sit here with such great people. I think of this entire panel, I'm the youngest member of alumni, just 4 years ago. So I am scared, but I'm going to try. Okay, so let's go to be back here. And we are products of the economy, just as the economy is a product of our actions and inactions. We want to try to bring some understanding to the money business and the decisions that go into money business. But first of all, we will give at most 2 minutes to each of the panelists to tell us a little bit about themselves. No, listen. That is not what I'm talking about. I am talking about your fond memories while being students here at AMEU, so that people don't see you as some extraterrestrial beings that have just come down to earth, but that you've always been here. So we will start from the monetary side. No, let's start from the fiscal side. We'll go to the fiscal side first. Mr. Alieu.
Thank you so much. I graduated from AMEU in 2007. I'm very sure most of you were not even here then. But it was, in fact, interestingly, I entered AMEU right after the war, 2003. So it was really, really difficult. In fact, we took the entrance, and we left. When the entrance result came, I didn't even know. The school started, it was like 1 month in lecture already. When I came down there on the campus, and I said, oh, I came to find out what the result out, and whether I could register. And they had one, TJ was there. TJ said, but school open already. In fact, the boy are in school for 1 month already. So he asked what I need. And TJ, they had our man, Tim Wilson, they were right in here. And Tim Wilson said, what I need? I said, oh, Alieu here. He said, oh, we're looking for you. You school the highest in the entrance. And they couldn't help, but at least they helped me to enroll. And to be frank, when we were here, there were a lot of things that we did, that the camaraderie that existed. You see, Rama, my best friend. Yeah, my best friend. I would go to his house in the MC, we sit down there, we study together. The madam cook, the mother, we even though that madam let me struggle. But it was a really, really good time. You know, we had very good friends, you know, James and other team later, and we were together, and everything really went out well. To be frank, I tell you, some of the friends that I have from AMEU are the best friends that I still have in the larger society. We may not meet every day, but when we meet one time, and that we just make up for all of the lost time. So please make maximum use of the friendship that you make here. Make friends. Don't just come go to class, leave class. Make friends. And those friendships will really be valuable to you. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go to the monitor side and allow Mr. J.G. Brown to give us some of his experience in 2 minutes.
Thank you, Julius, and I should say good afternoon, everyone. I have lots of fond memories about the pursuit of excellence, the AME University. In fact, the location of this panel discussion today reignites the memory about the fierce exchanges, political, social, and otherwise, that characterized our stay at the AME University. I vividly recall contesting for the presidency of AMEU on what was termed at the time as the Quadrilateral Manifesto. And one of the pillars had to do with infrastructural development. When we met the new president of the university, Gbleh-bo at the time, in fact, we pitched to hold the coincidence that I was a new president of the student union, and she was also a new president of the university. So we had a common objective of making sure we could impact the conditions on campus. So the project about this place was sold to Gbleh-bo, and she didn't hesitate. She said she would sponsor, administration would sponsor it. I recall during the launch of the opening of this area, the political divide could not permit one political institution claiming victory of this project. It was heavily disputed. I recall the former chairman of SAM, Valadol, who may be somewhere in television land looking at us. He had his militant all over. And he said, Swapok in that victory of this place. And we had other people, you know, also with the claim. But we thought that the objectives have been very clear that we needed to have impacted the condition on campus. And we enjoyed those times, we enjoyed all of the exchanges. Like Comrade Nyei mentioned, irrespective of the different views, whether national political views or local political party views, we have very strong bonds. And those bonds continue to persist today, even in our different areas of professionalism. So there's something that you can take away. Don't take anything so serious. Have fun, enjoy, interact. As Dius Besa said, make friends, network. And I think the road down the line is very, very bright for you all. Thank you.
Okay, so after we have laid the basis, we will now enter into our discussion on fiscal and monetary policy of an economy. We'll say less than an hour from now. When we say fiscal policy, what is it, and how does it factor into the overall functioning of an economy? For the next 4 minutes, Mr. Alieu would draw us through.
Thank you very much. Most times when people talk about the economy, we really think that it is a structure that exists outside. Maybe it is the government, it does not include the citizens, But if there is anything that I want you to take from this lecture today, and you will realize later during the conversation, is that when we talk about fiscal policy, it is that overarching policy framework that seeks to aid the citizens and spells out the relationship that exists between the citizens and their government in any society. Fiscal policy from the textbook is just the government's spending policies, decision to either increase expenditure or reduce expenditure during during an economic cycle. And normally, in order to do that, there are two major drivers, or what they call fiscal policy variables. One is through government spending. And when we talk about government spending, we're basically talking about government budget, how government makes decisions in terms of spending. And the second one is through taxation. Taxation is when government comes and says, oh, okay, when you're working, you pay salary, you earn salary, you pay tax on it. When you're driving or you want to make business, when you're business, after every period you have to pay taxes. If you're traveling, you have to pay taxes. Everything you have to pay taxes. Now the tax regime is the regime that spells out clearly what resources citizens commit to government, and then the government spending is the one that tells us how government really spends that money to deliver services right back to citizens. So the relationship, fiscal policy basically shows that mutually reinforcing relationship between the citizen and the government. And that's why I want people to really understand. And it is very important because if a government, and I want you to also understand that there are all of the countries have different budgets. Like Liberia, our budget is about 500 and some more million. If you look at countries like other countries are in billions. In Nigeria, it's I think about 13 to 14 billion. I think in Rwanda it's about 3 to 4 billion. So countries have different amounts in terms of the size of their budget. Now the size of your budget tells us the size or the quantum of resources that the government has available in order to deliver services for the people. So when you have people going to work for government at the end of the month, they need to get paid. Government pays through the budget. If government wants to build roads, government builds the road through the budget. If government wants to build schools, government wants to build hospitals, these are services that government has to provide by spending the resources through the budget. But the resources can only be spent if the government raises the resources through the revenue. And the revenue is paid by who? By the citizens. So whatever the government does, it's not the government that's doing it. It is the citizens that are that are delivering the services. That is why in organized democracy, in organized society, if a government does not deliver any service, the citizens demand that those services are provided. Why? Because it is the citizens that pay the money to the government. It's almost like you say, okay, we eat a class, and the susu, we give our money to the susu man, and then we agree that we're going to do something. If the person comes out at the end of the day and does something different, will you people just sit down and say, oh no, let the person just do anything they want to do with it? No. You have to be able to do that. And one important part of fiscal policy that I want to also clear out is that the way government spends money in the economy also helps to to build or enlarging the scope of resources that will be available to the government to spend in the next period. So in government expenditure, there are two types. They get what we call recurrent expenditure, the way you use to pay salaries and do all these other things. And they get investment expenditure, the money that you really spend on things that have the ability to regenerate revenue for you to be able to spend in the beginning period. So we will have a conversation and we'll talk about these things much more in detail. But fiscal policy has to do with government relationship with its citizens and the role the citizens have to play in ensuring that services and government are held accountable in delivering programs.
We'll go over to Mr. Brown to drill us through monetary policy. and how does it factor in the economy? What kind of impact does it make?
Thank you, Julius. One of the most important developments in the history of trade, commerce, and finance has been the introduction of money, especially money in the form that we know it to be today. At least some of us, or almost all of us in this room, may have read or heard about the barter system, which required the double coincidence of one. So what that means in plain language is that a producer of a chair cannot eat chair. So he has to eat maize, rice, and all of that. But because he's producing chairs and he wants to get maize, he wants to get rice, he has to trade. So under the barter system, the guy that had the rice or the maize, they have also have the need for your chair in order for you all to trade. You can imagine how difficult it is, how stagnated commerce and trade was under the barter system. Imagine also for somebody whose production had to do with something so big that you could not even go along with. So an innovative thinking brought about the introduction of money. How can we use different forms of money to have transactions consummated without even seeing the people behind those transactions, behind those productions? And I believe that the size of the economy we have today, the kinds of things we are able to do in the world today would not have been achieved without such an innovation. However, there are serious negative consequences that come with a mismanagement of the medium of exchange that we all use. In order to ensure that countries can properly regulate, manage, and influence the optimal supply of money or of currency on the market, over time, there have been developed what is termed as monetary policy, influencing, controlling the supply of money. There are different monetary policy regimes that could be employed. And the determination of whether country A takes regime 1, 2, or 3 is made on the basis of how developed your markets are, the kinds of relationships among certain variables, and we need not drill into those technical issues. You can either choose what is seen now as the gold standard for monetary policy framework called inflation targeting, IT, where the monetary policy authority of the country will set a particular rate of inflation, or to use other indices, and announce that to the public that over a given period we will work to ensure that inflation is X%. Mostly that number is 5% below. And there are other communication, other enhancement strategies around that framework. In the region right now, inflation targeting is not common, except for Ghana, that some analysts believe are not even full inflation targeters, but are doing what is termed as inflation targeting light. The other frameworks that countries could use are exchange rate targeting. And in the case of Liberia, since the establishment of the central bank up to a year or 2 ago, that was the framework, exchange rate targeting. And we all know the peculiar situation of our monetary arrangement in Liberia, we have two currencies circulating in the market, the US dollars and the Liberian dollars. So the decision makers, the high level policy makers of the central bank at the time thought that it is important to target exchange rate stability since that has cross-cutting implications on economic transactions in the country. There are other countries that do monetary aggregate targeting. So for students of economics, you know your M1, your M2, M3, and all of that. So they set a particular level of the quantity of money in the economy that the monetary authority will always want. Whether you choose IT, whether you choose exchange rate targeting, the overall objectives have to do with one, and that is prominent amongst most of the countries, to ensure price stability. People want to have some sort of predictability in terms of the value of the currency. You don't want to save and have $100 Liberian in your pocket, and you know that the next day, instead of it giving you 2 bread, we only give you 1. So one of the key objectives, overriding objective of all of these framework is price stability. There are other objectives, including financial sector stability, an area that I've done a lot of my work in the central bank. And of course, you have the overall economic growth and development. The Central Bank of Liberia has a restated and an amended act that was passed just last month. All along, the act establishing the central bank have called for price stability as the primary objective. But as developments have obtained in the country, and looking at what has happened in other countries, the restated and amended act has all 3 objectives, with price stability being the primary one. So financial sector stability, there are serious interlinkages between what happened in the financial sector and the wider economy. If there are issues in your banking sector, if there are issues in insurance and other financial services, certainly there will be repercussions on the economy. And all of us here don't need to be lectured on that relationship with what is currently obtaining. And I'm definitely sure that we will delve into these discussions better later.
I think we are already segueing in that. I'll remain with you on that. We know that one of the, as you stated, one of the issues of one of the reasons for monetary policy is to influence the money supply. What happens, or what leads to the fact that sometimes you don't, if you're supposed to be influencing money supply, why sometimes there will be no US dollars? Why sometimes there's no Liberian dollars? What is responsible?
I mean, if anyone had prepared to take a seat at me without anticipating such a question, that would have been really disappointing. And I should just quickly do a disclaimer here, especially as we delve deeper into some of these topics. As a staff of the central bank, the views I'm expressing here are my personal and professional views. They are not necessarily. I hope I shouldn't swallow it. But thanks for that analogy. As a staff of the central bank, the views I'm expressing here today are entirely my personal and professional views. And they should in no way necessarily be construed as a position, a policy statement, otherwise, of the Central Bank of Liberia. We have obligations, Malenda Company, Alieu, myself, and others, to impact career development in the country. And the fact that we work in the areas we work should not debar us from participating in these exercises. But the disclaimer is very important. The landscape of Liberia has had some very significant changes. As I indicated to you, the previous policy framework, monetary policy framework of the country, had to do with exchange rate targeting for reasons that are so obvious. Once there are changes in the exchange rate, you see they are passing through significantly the prices and all of that. The ordinary people are even good experts when it comes to exchange rate. So for a very long time, the central bank managed monetary arrangement using that framework. The way to do that is to get foreign currency and buy the local currency. Once you think that the quantum of local currency out there is just not in line with your objective, and then you do the reverse if you thought otherwise. The sad truth is you don't produce foreign currency in Liberia. The central bank can make interventions in the FX market up to its capacity in terms of generating foreign currency, which basically has to do with government generation capacity and selling FX to the central bank. We know that a few years ago there was a twin shock of drop in commodity prices in Liberia and the exit of the United Nations mission in Liberia. Those two things led to a sharp decline of the flow of foreign currency in the country, and by extension, the kind of foreign currency generation that government could have. So therefore, the central bank's capacity to continue that framework was impaired. So there was a conscious decision to introduce what is termed as the remittance split. So you do know that in time past, when you were sent $100 from America or somewhere, you went to the commercial bank or the local Western Union MoneyGram vendor and got the $100 in the foreign currency, and you went away to spend that. However, the central bank issued a circular calling for a split of that arrangement, where 25% of that will be received in the local currency. And this is very important for people to understand a major structural change in the monetary arrangement in the country. Remittance as a share of the country's GDP. And I know all of you know GDP. All of you know GDP, right? As a share of the country's GDP is more than 25%. That translates to at least $500 million United States dollars per annum. So even if 20% of that, which is around 100 million per annum, is converted to the local currency, that translates to almost 13 billion Liberian dollars, with an average exchange rate of around 125 to 130. What it means is, as we experience fall in commodity prices and the exit of AMEU, reduced quantum of foreign currency, and the introduction of this policy, loss of spending, loss of transactions in the economy shifted towards the local currency, the Liberian dollar. Some of us used to get our pay 100% in US dollars. Now 35% of our salary is in Liberian dollars. There are some institutions that converted 100% of salaries and other expenses in Liberian dollar. So the economy that we knew that had just around 9 billion or 10 billion Liberian dollars significantly grew in terms of its share of Liberian dollar. And the economic participants became used to an increased share of transacting in Liberian dollar, which means that the monetary authority should be empowered to provide that domestic currency in line with the changes in economic transaction. In order to have an effective management of monetary policy, the monetary authority should have either goal independence. We want to set target inflation, make sure that it's single digit. They should also have operational independence in terms of conducting open market operations. When do we put money on the market? When do we take money out? And they should have instrument independence in terms of what instruments we use to effect monetary changes. The legislation in Liberia, the extant legislation in Liberia, encroaches into the operational independence of the central bank. For one Liberian dollar to be printed, it has to go through a political process. It has to go through a process of legislation. So for all of you that follow the news, one of the press releases that came out of the central bank recently was that we got approval to print X amount of Liberian dollar when our analysis showed that we needed Y. So that is a fundamental reason. If you don't actually capacitate the local monetary authority to have sufficient local currency, you will have difficulty in effective monetary changes. In terms of the foreign currency, I think I already answered that. You don't have control, you don't produce it yet. So if you say you went for US dollar, you can get it, yeah. So foreign commodity prices, government inflow of US dollars, everything reduced. So I hope I answered.
Thank you. There will be further questions around that. Mr. Nyei, how do or where do fiscal policies and monetary policies interlock? Now, clarify to us which comes first or which has more influence over the other, fiscal policy or monetary policy?
Jay just explained quite meticulously the role, what central bank has been doing and how Liberia's own unique case of the dual currency and the role in that process. But if you look at fiscal policy is in the hand of the political authority. Fiscal policy is administered by the political authority. If you have a regime in which the political authorities also have more powers in ways that they can also influence what happens on the monetary side, then it becomes difficult to see the difference. Because one, let me just tell you this. When the government prepares its budget, government has to collect revenue in order to make spending. But if the government realizes that revenue is not coming in to meet its expenditure demand, what the government will do most times in other places, the government will go to the central bank. Sometimes, if the government knows that the central bank has reserve, cash there, and that is where the independence of the central bank is key. If you have a central bank that is not so independent, the government, the Ministry of Finance, can influence the central bank to go into the reserve and make payments to it in order to what? To make spending that it needs to make. Because there is always time inconsistencies with government revenue. Because government needs to make expenditure, government needs to spend today. But the revenues are expected to come maybe a month or 2 months from now. So the government needs to find revenue or money today. That's one way. Another way is that government can run the central bank and tell central bank, issue instruments for us. Whether it is treasury bills, which will be a short-term instrument, or government can also, in ways, in other countries, government can also influence the central bank to issue a full instrument in order to mop up and create money and reduce and stabilize the money supply. So there is the situation. If you have a situation where the government is spending so much money on account of borrowing, whether it is from domestic sources or external sources, and we know that domestic sources can be from commercial banks or also from central banks or through sale of instruments, what that does is that it puts the central bank under pressure. So because when government spends in the economy, money supply in the economy goes up. When money supply goes up, it puts pressure on the what? Exchange rate. In the case of Liberia, again, there are inflationary pressure. When those inflationary pressures get tense, it undermines, for example, the inflation targeting objective of the what? The central bank. So in any society, the relationship between the monetary and fiscal policy is very, very important. Very, very important. Because the both of them can undo each other. Central bank can decide to say, oh, we want to contain the money supply But central bank does not have control over the Ministry of Finance, which is the what? The entity of government responsible for monetary fiscal policy. If a Ministry of Finance increases expenditure of government spending in the economy, it means what? More money entering the economy. So if government has an objective, that's where monetary and fiscal policy coordination is very, very key. And that is where, in a way, and this is something that people have to understand. You can talk to each other and work together while at the same time protecting the independence and the authority of the central bank. It doesn't necessarily mean that coordinating or cooperating with the central bank, you have to go there and make decisions. No, it's more about what we call policy complementarity. Where if the central bank is coming up with a policy that is good for the economy, Ministry of Finance, fiscal policy should not undermine that policy. Or if the Ministry of Finance is coming up with a policy, the central bank should not also take action that will blatantly undermine that policy. So that is very, very key. And in any country, I tell you this, in any country where that authority or that relationship is undermined, there is going to be problem. When you have fiscal domination of monetary policy, there will be problem. That is exactly what we saw the beginning between 2018. There was glaring fiscal domination of monetary policy. When you say fiscal domination of monetary policy, it simply means that you have the Ministry of Finance, basically whether overtly or openly or tacitly getting involved in trying to influence decisions of the central bank in ways that are injurious to what? To monetary policy. But thank God with the new with the engagement of the IMEU, the new monetary policy scale of the central bank, we're hoping that there will be less and less friction between fiscal policy and monetary policy, because once you have that friction, there is going to be problem. And clearly, what we are observing may not necessarily be the result of the lack of that breakdown today, but breakdowns that may have occurred in time past may have also contributed to what we see today. Because in monetary policy and in banking, my colleague will tell you, banking is a trust-based relationship. The reason why you wake up in the morning, you have money, and you decide to put something in the bank is because you know that if you need that money 1 week from now, when you go to the central bank or when you go to the commercial bank, when you stay online, you get it. Ask yourself one question. If that trust is broken, that is, you put your money in the bank and you go there, you don't get it. If you have money in the desk account, what will you do with it? And when money is taken away of the what? When people take money away from the commercial bank, do you know what happens? They undermine the ability of the what? The central bank to influence what? Monetary policy and hence fiscal policy. So that is something that we have to understand. It's not complex, but it is common sense. Thank you.
Are we learning something? Okay. Yeah. Now, so I'm very much interested in how the money can work, and what you refer to as the interoperability among all of you, the bank, the central bank, and the commercial banks. How does it happen that you can go to a commercial bank and they tell you this is the amount that you can take and this is not the amount that you can take? In fact, how does central bank get reserve? How are you able to say you are stabilizing the money supply? Why is it the money? I mean, just the money and I can get it. Why are we keeping some? Why are reserve and all that kind of thing? Get some to this commercial bank, you bring some back, all that kind of thing. Why does it happen?
I like the way you placed the question. Why would you just leave everything right? And the guys from Zimbabwe and other countries will tell you, no, don't allow your central bank or your government to leave everything and just allow the market to be flooded with money. Because at some point in their monetary history, people had to put currency in barrels to go to stores to get bread. So you talk about hyperinflationary situation. And again, one of the tools that you can use to assess that has to do with the quantity theory of money. So with people familiar with the quantity equation where MD is equal to PY. And again, not to be so technical, but the simplistic way is those are two variables, right? The B is assumed to be constant, and Y, which has to do with the economy, the size of the economy, is assumed to be fixed in the short period. So in the long, it is assumed to be fixed in the short period. It can change only in the long term. So in the short term, you have control over the quantum of money, M, as well as prices, P. So for every change that you will have in M, the simplest version of that quantitative equation, for every change that you will have in M, you translate to the change in P. So you just allow M to be going out. Everybody just get currencies. Maybe somebody say the helicopter approach. You just take helicopter and just drop money all over. That's how P, the prices, will be shooting up. So you can't allow it to actually be like that. So you need sound monetary policy management. And as my learned colleague again forcefully articulated about the kinds of coordination you need, because on the fiscal side, there are many things that could happen. All right, fiscal policy could make monetary policy completely mute. Anything you do on the monetary side, the fiscal people, based on your disposition, could just make that irrelevant. So fiscal dominance, you already talked about that. The catch is to have coordination. So there could be disagreements in terms of the different perspectives, but when you talk to each other, when you coordinate, and at some point we headed the liquidity working group. He was the assistant minister that came to the central bank. We all sat around the liquidity working group and understood exactly what the government plans in terms of infusing money, in terms of spending, and what the central bank will do to counteract that if there is a build-up of inflation. So the coordination is very, very important. Milton Friedman, one of the most heralded monetarists in history, he made a caricature of people who do monetary policy. He said they are like fool in the shower. All right, when you enter the shower and you try to drizzle the water is cold. So you try to turn it a little bit, thinking that it will get hot, but there is a lag. When you turn it, the water doesn't really get hot immediately, and then you get vexed, you turn it way down. And then it gets very hot, and you say no. You start to turn it back on the left. But it doesn't get cold again immediately. And then you turn it way on the left, it becomes very cold. So the whole issue is about fine tuning. It's not about saying, let the market just go ahead, anybody who wants money, let it just go somewhere, we can give them money. It's about fine tuning, and there are deep analysis that go into this. We have to look at the growth, the current and projected growth in economic activities. Liberia has a growing youthful population. So as more people leave the walls of high school, enter university, try to get to the job sector, the demand for money, they have to do transaction. So you have people, some of the best minds on the macroeconomic team of the country studying all of these indicators. And they are the best people to make a determination to say, we need 30 billion for the economy. We need 25 billion for the economy. So the best way is to have an independent central bank, at least at the operational level. We don't have an impairment from a political process.
Okay. Given all of the issues that we see, Mr. Nyei, in terms of, because fiscal policy too, as you mentioned, is headed by politicians who also go by political timelines and are influenced by sometimes the next election cycle. But understanding all of that, there is this usual debate over whether it is feasible to use just the Liberian dollar. Now we're in a situation right now where some stores, business owners will refuse the US dollar, which for me looks like a real opportunity to explore the possibility of using only the Liberian dollar. Now the other side to that question, in terms of fiscal decision making, is how do you make that kind of decision, factoring in monetary policy, and say, okay, we're going to go, what could influence us going to a single currency regime like other countries in the sub-region, that we will not need to use the US dollar. And again, what makes the US dollar important to our economy that we find it difficult to move away from it? All of those are in our own question.
So, hello. Man. So the question you asked about what will happen. The first thing is, I just was talking about considering what's happening now. Let me tell you one thing. Like Dr. Brown said earlier when he started, those who understand, they know something about exchange rate economics. The people in the market understand exchange rate economics far better than us. Far better than us. We say sometimes they read the textbook, we think we know it. They know very well that the Liberian dollar is getting stronger in value with the what? The reduction of the what? The exchange rate. It means the Liberian dollar is getting what? Stronger. But prices are not falling to commensurate with the change or with the strength of the Liberian dollar. So what that means is, if you were to make any transaction in Liberian dollar, if you make that transaction at the old rate before the Liberian dollar started getting strong, you'll be profiteering. That's why when you go to buy for anybody now, they say, no, I'm only selling Liberian dollar. Because what? When you go, you change that US dollar to Liberian dollar, you get less money. Sometimes you have to add up. So when you bring it to the man, he makes more money, or the lady, she makes more money. So that's simple economics. And the issue about whether we'll move, when we move from we'll move from this dual currency regime to single currency regime, whether it will be good, whether it will not be good. I think this discussion has been held so long. In fact, I think the central bank even developed de-dollarization, a roadmap for de-dollarization. You know? But also at some point in time, I was just asking from the ground about this whole ECOWAS single currency ECO stuff, because I know I attended a couple of meetings, and there was also the entire process was advanced. But you know that is also a political process. Whenever you have a situation where politicians are mixing with technicians, and we know clearly the politicians have a way of reminding you, when you are a technician, my young man, my young lady, you are not going for a re-election. The politician is the one that was elected. And technically, they should make all of the decisions, because what? They were the ones that were elected. They are the ones that are supposed to face the people. And the role of a citizen, an informed citizen group, is to make sure that the things that need to happen in order to make sure that the right things, that the political leaders are held accountable. So, for example, we'll talk about fiscal policy. The way the government spends money in the economy is very, very important. It's very, very important. The difference, I always, when I teach public finance, I give this example. So, and we all have these examples in our community. You will have two friends, or two persons you know, or families in your community. One family, you know that the man making maybe 2,000 naira every month. Another family, you know that man making maybe 300 or 400 every month. But sometimes you see the men are making 2,000, they won't be children how they eat. Sometimes no quarrel, they won't have to keep taking away. But that men are making 300, 400, everything organized. The men children eating, they're going to school, everything organized. Then you wonder, why is it that this man has made so much small money? His home is organized, but this man that makes so much money, his home is disorganized. The difference is the way government spend money. Government around the world spend money differently. Government set up priorities. All governments set up priorities. But government spend money most times differently. And I always tell people, if you want to know whether a government is serious about policy implementation or about service delivery, don't listen to how the government, what the government say about policy implementation, about service delivery. No. Just see the expenditure report and see where is the government spending more money. Where is the government spending more money? Because the more you spend money on projects, on areas that have the ability to influence future, for example, when you spend on education, even though education expenditure large, but education has the greatest return in the long run. You know? So if you have a country that says that okay, we value education, when they start investing into technology, science, investing into the young people, what you realize is that 5-6 years later, the quality of their human capital grows. When the quality of their human capital grows, it means they can do bigger things, they can do more things, they can do important things. The reverse is also true. So that is why we have to be very, very keen. It is not like to say when you move to one currency regime, then your parents solve. Or the reason we have all these problems is because we have to work on 2 currency regimes low. The thing, what I have said, and that is exactly what my colleague has been saying, is more about the kind of policy regime you have, the kind of coordination that exists between policy implementation, the kind of capabilities that you attract in policy development and implementation. All of these factors, there is no way you can jump over all of any of them and succeed. You have to make sure you get the right people, you give them the political, you give them the space to work. For example, if you have an independent central bank, hire technicians, give the technicians the authority to make decisions and respect the policy decision, because at the end of the day, that is what the economy will need in order to survive.
Okay, after him, one question apiece because we have to go, and then we'll perhaps take a few from the public. Okay, so we'll come back to you, sir. Central banks around the world usually change the currency, the kind of denominations. Why do they do that? And do we have different qualities of money? I'm asking that question because the British pound looks like plastic. You can't, especially if it is new, you can't do it like this. Is that a better quality or what?
These are very great questions, and some of the answers are pretty straightforward. In terms of the quality of the banknotes, yes, indeed there are different grades. Even jurisdictions in our sub-region, Ghana, Nigeria, have all introduced enhanced grades, enhanced quality of banknotes. The kind of a material is termed as polymer, but there is a catch about this. You normally don't go and print these banknotes on credit. You need to have, especially the foreign currency, to print banknotes and import them into the country. The cost of printing the polymer or the plastic-like type of banknote is at least twice what you will spend to print the paper or the type of banknote that we have. But there is also a long-term gain. In as much as the cost is twice, the durability is at least 4 times. So it makes economic sense from a CBA perspective, cost-benefit analysis perspective, to go for polymer. The constraint is you don't have the fiscal resources, you don't have the buffers, you don't have the sufficiency of the reserve to actually go for that. And I can understand why even 5 bigger economies like Nigeria and Ghana are doing it in phases. So they look for certain denominations, they put it in polymer, and then later on they take another one. So that is sequence with the government inflows. Perhaps we will get a spark and identify a major revenue somewhere. That would be a viable proposal to have enhanced quality of bank notes on the market. So I think that question is pretty straightforward. There was a previous question before that.
Why did the center exchange?
Okay, the denomination, and I think that has a nexus to the kind of issues that Comrade Nyei just discussed. All right, so you have to look at the way the economy is working and the direction of the economy. So you will note that before we had the largest denomination being 100, and there was a conscious decision to introduce the 500. That was tied to the thinking of rolling out the de-dollarization roadmap of the country. And what is the logic behind that? If somebody went to buy something that costs $50,000 Liberian dollars, and he has to carry all 50s, all 20s, all 100s, it becomes uncomfortable, right? So one of the key characteristics of acceptability of money is its portability. So introducing 500 denomination, and there is even, or there has been several proposals of moving over to 1,000, will make it that he just slot a bundle in his coat pocket and he can execute large volume transactions. But I also want to add that the road to de-dollarization, once that decision is made, and I believe that there have been lots of consensus in terms of moving in that direction, it's not going to be an overnight thing. The literature is very clear. The technicians that have studied this thing all around the world, they're very clear. Countries that pursued forced de-dollarization sooner reverted to being dollarized, and the level of dollarization was even far higher than the time they started to de-dollarize. So it is not advisable to have an edict tomorrow. President announced, the legislature passes something and say, beginning tomorrow there is no US dollars. You have to take what is termed as a market-based approach, and that takes time. So a comprehensive roadmap has been developed. There have to be some tweaks, I would think, and perhaps people are already having deliberations along those lines. You have to develop the local market. And in addition to introducing the 500 bank notes, one of the things that happened over the last 2 years was the introduction of the central bank instruments. So what that means, at the current monetary policy rate of 25%, people can invest in the local currency, in Liberian dollars, in central bank instruments. And somebody asked this morning on one show, what does that mean? So you give central bank 10,000 Liberian dollars, we give you a receipt or a certificate, and then at the end of a year, because the 25% is per annum, they give you a 25% return. And this is safe, this is secure. These policy interventions are intended to create value, to create more attraction for the domestic currency. Once you have these things being fully subscribed, people enhancing the utilization of the Liberian dollar, gradually you will be on the path to de-dollarization. I also think that the global studies that have been done may need some adjustment. I believe that the process should not be that rapid, but I also believe that it should not be that slow because of the peculiar situation of Liberia, where all of us, our forefathers, everybody, were born with this issue of dollarization. So this is something so ingrained in the society, in the US, and it's so ingrained. So you might need at some point to take much more targeted and much more robust decision to have a reversal of this process.
Okay, so we are coming to the end, and this will be the final question from my end, because you have to go. There are other activities for the day, games coming up. Much has been said, and Mr. Nyei, you have worked in the fiscal area, you have collaborated with monetary people, you have held meetings where you agree and disagree, sometimes very ferociously. In in all of this, how do you think the future is going to pan out? Let's say 5-10 years from now, in terms of the growth of the economy, in terms of some of the things, the low-hanging fruits that you think the country could start grabbing onto to ensure that the economy can perform better?
Yeah, very big question. It's a question that I don't think I really have an answer to. But as a fact, as a reformer, I'm always optimistic about the future. And that's the thing I encourage everybody. Never ever be pessimistic about tomorrow. Because if you want to be pessimistic about tomorrow, then you must just well die today. If tomorrow is not going to be better. So we're optimistic that things can get better. Our economy is started. It has been started for quite a while. Since 2014, our budget has been started. And the only way to really grow this country, then to be able to develop this country, we need to grow the economy, we need to grow the budget. A lot has been said about the structural shift that we need to take place in the economy, moving from rent, from natural resource rent to much more industrialization, to service delivery. I have been doing research on Liberian economy. I have read papers as far back as the 60s, 70s, and the same issues we're trying to deal with today. Those guys were dealing with those same issues. So sometimes I ask myself, why is it that even when Gato and other guys that wrote the Flora report were writing about this issue, 1973, and they were writing and publishing some of the biggest economic journals in the world on these issues. And 30, 40, 50 years later, we're still dealing with these issues. So for me, I think the real thing we need to do is to really be intentional about development. And the way to do it is, for example, we start to say, okay, let us expand markets. Let us create new markets. And the way you create new markets is to expand economic opportunities. That's the way, like, just look at a farm. You get 50 children and you have a farm. You make it. The farm is not growing. To be able to feed all of the children, you need to grow the farm. That is what we call economic growth. Enlarging the farm. When you enlarge the farm, the next thing is, when you have it, how you will share the produce on everybody. That is the equity aspect, and we can talk about that later. But the whole issue about how can we restart, how do we do this, there has been a lot of been said. And it is a discussion that I think is not good for the people because it's a huge conversation that will require several hours to talk about. So I just like to say really thank you. And frankly, I want to say thanks to the leadership of the Alumni Association, because I have not seen this kind of frank, honest, evidence-based, policy-driven discussion about the economy, about issues in a very long time. When you go to discussion, you may hear people talking about what the government is doing right, what the government is not doing right. But we have a whole conversation over an hour. We're not even mentioning about this government. And that is the kind of conversation that we need to have. Let policymakers sit back and think and say that, oh, I think we're not doing this thing right from the conversation that I hear this guy saying. Or, oh, I think we need to improve on this. We need to improve on this. When you tell people, when we have more of these kind of conversations, void of the political politics and the political rhetoric, it will be good for our country. And importantly, Julius, more technicians, more experts will join the conversation. As it is now, we are shying away a lot of people, technicians, from the conversation. The more we take politics away from the conversation, the more experts will be more comfortable to come in and discuss issues, because at the end of the day, their conversation and their position will be respected. Thank you.
That was the voice of Alieu Nyei. He has studied all kind of numbers and economics stuff, and he has served in many places related to that. I guess he's doing a whole lot of consultancies too related to that. That is my guess. Now, we come to you, sir, for your party comments, but including in that, I know that the central bank over the few years has been moving more towards the digital economy. And I know in other countries, sometimes you can transact a whole month without holding money. Without holding money. Do you look at the Liberia 5 to 10 years from now that we could do most of our buying, transaction without necessarily having to use money? Do you think it is possible? And what are some of the drivers that could lead us there?
Thank you for the final question, and I think that was a very good way to lead us to the exit to look at the opportunities, since we highlighted some of the challenges during the course of the discussion so far. The financial landscape in the country is already changing through digitization. People can now sit in the comfort of their homes, can lie on the bed, and execute transactions digitally. A few years ago, that was almost like a mirage. Most recently, you heard about the international remittance and the digital termination of that. So someone in the US can be called in the middle of the night that your mother has a problem or your family member has a problem, there is no money. They can instantly send to your mobile phone a digital transfer, and you can get off the vehicle and go to the hospital and solve that. That is the global trend. That is the hope that the entire world has right now. We are going through one of the worst crises since the Great Depression of the 1930s. And this crisis is termed as the Great Lockdown. Economies have been plummeting. Mr. Nyei mentioned about the subdued economic growth that we've had in the country even before COVID, and COVID has even exacerbated that. Even more significantly, the crisis actually called for ramping up fiscal and monetary efforts. Already around the world, the initial interventions by central banks to provide liquidity support has exceeded $6 billion. And on the fiscal side, to provide stimulus and others has exceeded $8 billion. So one of the key areas we have to look at as we crawl our way out of the crisis, out of the ebb of the crisis, is to identify new frontiers, to reallocate resources into areas that have potential for growth. And one of the major areas is the digital space. And let me just conclude on this. While we're waiting for the program, I saw the narrative on the wall about the automation of the registration process at AMEU University, which is very tremendous. We did not have the opportunity. That is innovation. That is very great. But one of my quickest observations was, after you should have done all of the processes, I don't know whether it has changed, but my reference is the placard on the board right behind you. After you should have done all of the punches, the key punches on the system, you have to go to the international bank, make a payment, and then you come and complete. This is a potential for improvement. With all of the financial digitalization that we have in, somebody at midnight should remain on his smartphone and even do payment, get his electronic receipt, get everything. So those are the areas that we have to put resources. Beyond that, the world of biometrics. So people have to be digitally identified. So the National Identification Registry has been doing a great job. But next year, it has already been announced that if you don't have the National Identification ID, which is biometrically enhanced, you wouldn't be able to make phone calls because your lines will be blocked. And that will also be taken to the financial sector. You wouldn't be able to execute financial transactions. So the issue of attendance, beyond that innovation, perhaps when we all return here a year from now or so, we should have biometrics at the different entrances. Teachers should not be looking around about who came to class. That should be automated. As soon as it is time for a particular class, in that particular room, the system should record that classes have started. And as you put in the thumbprint, your attendance should be recorded and calculated. So there are vast potential in the digital space for us to grow our way out of the economy. And I am also optimistic about the future of the world, about the future of Nigeria as Manconi. Thank you very much.
Well, graduates, seniors, alumni, everybody else who has been watching this, there has been a healthy conversation on the Liberian economy, sometimes with suggestions from across the world. Like Alieu said, one of the most honest conversations in our country that was extremely non-political. And yes, many technocrats, technicians are shying away. As a talk show host, I get that a lot. I tried contacting these guys. I've done everything to bring Alieu to the conversation, and he has always run away. At least I could get him here today. So that is still okay. I just want to say, in the words of Bishop T.D. Jakes, in whatever you do, always try to be more effective than trying to be famous. If you can do your work more effectively, the theme that comes with being effective will also come. Thanks so kindly. My name is Julius J.